All right, hello. Welcome to episode 2 of the C47 podcast. Don't know what our name means yet, though. Anyways, anyways, I'm here with the same person I was with last time, and today we're going over part 2 of Beak of the Finch by the Jonathan man. Yeah.
Okay, so chapter 8 talks mostly about Peter and Rosemary analyzing their data when they're back at Princeton.
They did the data.
They did.
They did do the data.
So, they focus a lot on hybrids. So, hybrids are one species breeding with another that they can actually breed together because oftentimes it's not possible. So, they do. Their offspring is a hybrid, but oftentimes they don't survive. But they started to see a difference after the El Nino because the hybrids started to survive, and some of them did even better than the birds they came from. So that kind of brought up the idea of like new species.
Like some examples of these hybrids, you got the liger, which is a lion and a tiger.
Right.
You got the mule, which is a horse and a donkey. And my favorite, the lionfish, the lion and the fish.
Yeah, the lionfish is my favorite hybrid too.
That's my favorite.
So anyway, so this is where they kind of introduce and talk more heavily about in chapter 2, or part 2, the creation of a new species. And
it's one of the many ways evolution happens. In conjunction with hybridization.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's some fruit flies.
There are some fruit flies. In chapter 12, they talk about the South American fruit flies. So these fruit flies, these were kind of studied. They didn't study them well enough, as you'll see here. But in a span of only 5 years, they hybridized, and they made a new species in just those 5 years. But they had no idea like what led to that or like how in detail it happened because they didn't study them enough in the 5 years.
So what happened was they hybridized the two original species of flies, right?
They did hybridize
So what happened
flies.
was they kind of walked away for, what was it, 4 years?
5 years.
So they hybridized them, but the hybrids could then breed back with the original two, and so they thought,
They
what is
kept
it?
going, ooh,
Yeah, so it's
getting farther
just
and farther apart until
it's-
new species.
Yeah. So at
So
first
they
what
think.
happened was the hybrids could rebreed with the original. Then they walked away, and when they came back, the hybrids could no longer breed with the other species. So that's how they marked it to be a new species.
Yeah.
And they gave some interesting examples of what might have been happening in the cage, and they said the most viable way was a bacterial infection that they could no longer breed with the other fruit flies, which was interesting.
Like the mules. And
Yeah,
how they
exactly.
can't breed.
But instead, it was a new species.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that was our first look at a brand new species that they created. But sadly, they didn't take careful enough notes and observations, and so they don't know what happened. So they kind of just left them in the cage, and then they had a lot of children and new species.
Remember, kids, laziness harms you.
And also, keep track of your offspring. Another interesting point in this part was Dolph. He really looked up to Lack, which is kind of interesting. He thought they should be called lax finches because he thought Lack did a lot more than Darwin did with the finches. Anyway, for his PhD study, he looked at competition and variation on some more mountainous islands in the Galapagos.
You know what he did? He looked at the finches, the birds. So they were all spreading out, and because they were spreading out over this huge area, they changed niches and jobs, and that just led to a whole bunch of mingling.
Yeah, and really
in
what
evolution.
happened was it was a big height difference because the one species of bird. So the reason they had to spread out because they were two very similar birds. One changed a little bit, and stayed more at the base or lower elevations, and the other one went higher up and on the sides of the mountain to spread out the niche more. And then they ended up evolving to eat different foods. And
Another
he looked
way
at a bunch.
evolution happens.
Yeah, he looked at a bunch of different islands, and it was continuous through all of them. All the birds kind of try to get out of each other's niches.
Yeah, but you know what else changes? The way you can get discounts on online stores from our sponsor, Honey. So, Honey, our first sponsor of the day. They pretty much, it's a free extension. They scour the internet for discount codes, and you get to save money for free. Free. I know, it's crazy, but it works. You know why it's called Honey? It's because it's sweet, like actual honey. So, you're pretty much just saving free money. So if you use our code C47 Bee Juice, that's the code. You get a free coupon to save $10 on any purchase you make. It's crazy. Anyways, we're gonna go back to evolution.
So back to evolution. One thing that Dolph found was what he called character displacement. It's when one species evolves to go out of the competition, because the two finches were in competition with each other, right?
Yeah.
So they evolved so they could live in different areas. So they kind of evolved out. So both characters evolved. Both species characteristics evolved, so they could spread out and then survive, and there was no more competition.
So win-win
they
situation.
can exist better.
It's mutualism. One of the three types, or both gain something.
So a problem they faced and had to answer was how can super complex organs like an eyeball form? And so to do a study, they looked at crossbills. Crossbills have strange beaks that the tips cross over each other, and they're really good at opening pine cones because of this. So what they did to prove that the beaks evolved slowly over time, and it didn't just happen, they weren't just created like that, they snipped the beaks, which didn't harm the birds except for what they could eat. They could no longer open up the pine cones at all. They had to find open pine cones and open seeds to eat.
They were literally useless.
Yeah. And then they, as the bills started to grow back to their crossedness.
Yes. Ooh. That's the sound of crossness.
Oh, interesting. They were able to open tougher and tougher pine cones until their beaks were fully back. And even if it was a microscopic difference, like we couldn't see the difference in the beaks, they could still open tougher pine cones than if they didn't have the cross at all. So it really evolves. It shows that it evolves slowly, but it really helps.
You know what they say, a cross in the beak gives really good fortune.
Another example they gave was sticklebacks.
You know, sticklebacks, they're aquatic birds, sometimes known as fish.
Right. They have gills and scales. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that was a next episode's sponsor there. Anyways, moving on from that. I don't know what that was.
The sticklebacks.
There's a lot of monkeys in our studio recently. I don't know where they come from, but whatever. Anyways, back to the sticklebacks.
The sticklebacks, they kind of evolved in what they eat. So there were these ponds that kind of got cut off, right?
Yeah.
So it's the sticklebacks, they weren't coming from anywhere, so they just evolved in their ponds, right?
Yeah.
So anyway,
I evolve in my pond all the time.
I think we all evolve in our ponds sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what happened is they changed what they would feed on, so they're not all in the same niche. Some fed on the bottom, some fed up in the water column and fed on fish, some ate like scraps, and some even pecked out other fish's eyeballs.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a strat.
It is, and it made them survive, so that's how they evolved.
It's pretty overpowered.
It wasn't, because if they run out of fish eyeballs, then they die.
Well,
but there's enough fish eyeballs for them to eat.
Oh, yeah. They're all special in their own way, and we accept them for it.
Yes.
Oh, ignore that. All right.
So another interesting thing was fusion or fission.
Oh, fusion or fission. Oh, yeah. Anyways, what he said, fusion or fission. These are two different types of, I guess, evolutions per se. So fusion
It has to deal
is
with hybrids. Too.
yes, hybrids. So fusion is when a bunch of species do the hybridization,
Right.
and they all create this mixing salad bowl of hybrids that they kind of absorb into one. It's like a soup. And fission is when they hybridize.
And then the hybrids survive.
Yeah, and they make a new species.
Yeah, so that's alongside the other two
They fizz
original
off.
ones that made the hybrids.
Yeah,
So they kind of just make a new one.
and that's just another type of
Fizz.
I guess. Yeah, fission. And another way evolution happens is adaptation. Adaptations. One example in the chapter was the deaths of the cactus and the lower numbers of the cactus finches.
Right, yeah.
So, well, the Super El Niso, which is what it might have been. No.
El Nino,
yeah.
as most people say.
As most. I'm not one of the most. But yeah, some would say. But yeah, all the cactus started to die, and the cactus finches, they use the cactus for literally everything, but they don't know how to adapt. So when the cactus died, they just kind of also died, and they didn't live. Also known as dying.
Good
And,
definition.
But the ground finches, they knew how to adapt. They could innovate, overcome, and adapt, and adaptize. They knew, so they thrived. Where the cactus finches, they were dumb and bad, and they sucked a whole lot, and
Yes,
they died.
The ground finches had
They got screwed
innovation
over.
that excites.
They do. Anyways, we'll go over this last topic here, and
So
we'll close it
another
off.
interesting thing, they use computers a lot in ecology and studying the finches because they have to make calculations and do a lot with math. So one thing that really proved how much work the grants did was they made some computer predictions about what
They did predict computers.
yeah, about what the measurements of finches would be.
Yeah.
And their predictions were exactly spot on, because meaning their formula is useful, and they took enough measurements,
Mhm.
which is
They did their lesson masters.
they did their lesson master A's and B's.
And C's. They had C's too back then.
Oh, okay.
Well, anyways, we better close this off. The monkeys are getting riled up. We need to feed them. We'll leave you with this question though. Would you rather have bacon but no game, or unlimited game but no game?